Leah Marston walked into a Silver Spring grocery store at midnight to buy medicine for her feverish son. The manager, Caleb Rourke, humiliated her in front of strangers, snatched the bottle from her hands, called her "you people," and accused her of running a scam when her card declined. But what Caleb didn't know, the man who just walked through the door wasn't a regular customer. He was Leah's estranged brother, a corporate investigator who'd been hunting Caleb for months. Not to save her. He'd been there before she arrived. Because 3 years ago, Caleb destroyed their family with a lie that killed someone they loved. And tonight, when investigators checked the store's transaction logs, they found something worse than racism. Something federal. Something that would expose hundreds of victims and $250,000 in stolen money. This isn't just about humiliation. It's about justice that's been 3 years in the making. Drop a comment. Kindly subscribe. Would you have walked away or stayed to watch it all burn? The fluorescent lights inside Greenwood Market buzzed like wasps trapped in glass. Leah Marston felt them before she even pushed through the door. That low hum that made exhaustion feel heavier, made thinking slower. She shouldn't be here. Not at 11:47 p.m. Not after a 12-hour shift wiping down bed rails and changing 4 bags at the assisted living home on Colesville Road. Not with her son Ezra burning up at 102 degrees, his small body shaking under 2 blankets, while her neighbor watched him for 20 minutes. 20 minutes. That's all she had. The sale bin near the entrance caught her eye first. Children's fever syrup, marked down to $4.99. She'd seen it advertised on the chipped community board outside the Langley Park Metro. $4.99. She could do that. Barely. Leah grabbed a bottle, her fingers trembling just enough to make the plastic rattle. She kept her head low. Always did in places like this. Because she'd learned, over years, over moments she couldn't forget even when she tried, that some people looked at her and made decisions before she ever opened her mouth. Decisions about what she could afford, what she deserved, whether she belonged. And tonight, she felt it again. That tightening in her chest. The sense that someone, somewhere in the aisles, had already made up their mind. The store was nearly empty. A man in paint-stained jeans studied motor oil near the back. An older woman thumbed through gossip magazines by the register, not buying, just killing time. And then there was him. Caleb Rourke, store manager. Name tag crooked, arms folded across his chest like a border wall. He stood near the cleaning supplies, but he wasn't stocking shelves. He was watching her. Not glancing. Not passing attention from one customer to the next. Watching. Leah's pulse kicked up. She told herself it didn't mean anything. Told herself she was being paranoid. That maybe he watched everyone. That this was just part of his job. But her instincts, the ones built from 100 small cuts, 1,000 tiny humiliations, said otherwise. She moved toward the counter, gripping the medicine like it might slip from her hands if she wasn't careful. The cashier, a young guy with headphones half off, reached for the scanner. And that's when Caleb stepped forward. Not casual, not helpful, aggressive. He cut between Leah and the register, his hand shooting out to grab the bottle from her grip before she could even react. "Hold on," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it sliced the air clean. And everyone in the store turned to look at her. Leah had been in rooms like this before. Not this store. Not this exact counter with its scratched plexiglass and faded lottery posters peeling at the corners. But rooms that felt the same. Rooms where the air changed the moment she walked in. Where people didn't need to say anything for her to know she'd already been sorted, labeled, dismissed. This was one of those rooms. Caleb still held the medicine bottle in his hand, turning it slowly like he was inspecting evidence. His eyes moved from the label to her face, then back again. Deliberate. Cold. The cashier froze, his hand hovering over the scanner. He looked young, maybe 19, 20, with the kind of uncertainty that comes from knowing something's wrong but not having the power to stop it. Leah forced herself to breathe evenly. She couldn't afford to react. Not here. Not in front of strangers who'd make their own assumptions about why a black woman in scrubs was being interrogated over a $5 bottle of children's Tylenol. "Is there a problem?" she asked quietly. Caleb didn't answer right away. He let the silence stretch, let it fill the space between them like smoke. The older woman by the magazines had stopped pretending to read. The man near the motor oil had gone still, listening. Leah felt their eyes on her back, felt the weight of their curiosity, their judgment, their need to see how this would play out. If you've ever been watched like you don't belong, subscribe. You'll want to see where this goes. Caleb's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. Something meaner. Just doing my job, he said finally. We've had issues lately. People trying to pull things. You understand. People. The word landed like a slap. Leah understood perfectly. She'd heard it before. In different stores, different cities, different moments. Always delivered the same way. Always meaning the same thing. You people. Her fingers curled into fists at her sides, nails pressing into her palms hard enough to sting. She wanted to scream. Wanted to grab the bottle back and walk out. Wanted to demand he say it outright instead of hiding behind corporate speak and fake politeness. But she couldn't, because Ezra was home with a fever that wouldn't break, and she needed this medicine, and making a scene would only prove whatever Caleb had already decided about her. So she swallowed the rage, swallowed the humiliation, and kept her voice level. I'm just trying to buy medicine for my son. Caleb's eyes flickered with something dark. Not sympathy, not understanding, satisfaction. He'd gotten exactly what he wanted. Her on the defensive, her explaining herself, her proving she had a right to be here. And he wasn't done yet. The medicine bottle looked cheap in Caleb's hand. Generic brand, bright orange cap, the kind of syrup that tasted like fake cherry and left a sticky film on the spoon. But to Leah, it was everything. It was Ezra's fever breaking by morning. It was him sleeping through the night instead of whimpering in pain. It was her being able to go back to work tomorrow without calling in sick, again, and risking the write-up her supervisor had already threatened. It was $4.99 standing between functional and falling apart. And Caleb was holding it like it was evidence. Leah's throat tightened. She'd already done the math 3 times on the bus ride here. She had exactly $7.32 in her checking account after the electric bill cleared. Enough for the medicine. Enough to get through until Friday's paycheck hit. She couldn't lose this. Caleb turned the bottle over slowly, reading the back label like he was searching for something. His jaw worked in a slow chew, gum, maybe, or just the rhythm of someone who enjoyed making people wait. Your son's sick, he asked. The question sounded innocent. Concerned, even. But his tone wasn't. Yes, Leah said. That's rough. Caleb tilted his head, eyes narrowing. Kids get expensive when they're sick. All those doctor visits. Prescriptions. Must be hard. There it was. The dig wrapped in sympathy. The implication that she couldn't handle it. That she was barely keeping it together. And he was right. But he didn't get to say it. Leah straightened her shoulders, forcing herself to meet his gaze. I'd like to pay for that. Please. Caleb didn't move. Didn't hand the bottle to the cashier. Didn't step aside. He just stood there, blocking her path, holding what she needed just out of reach. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered once, twice. Behind her, the older woman whispered something to herself. Leah couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear. Disapproval. Judgment. The man by the motor oil had moved closer, pretending to browse the candy aisle but really watching the scene unfold. Leah felt the room closing in. She thought about Ezra, about how small he'd looked under those blankets, his skin hot to the touch, his eyes glassy and unfocused. About how he'd whispered, "Mama, it hurts," and she'd promised she'd make it better. She couldn't go home empty-handed. She wouldn't. Caleb finally set the bottle on the counter. Not gently. He dropped it with a dull thud, the liquid inside sloshing against the plastic. Let's see if you can actually pay for it, he said. And Leah's stomach dropped. Because she heard what he didn't say. Let's see if your card even works. Let's see if you're wasting my time. Let's see if you're exactly what I think you are. She reached into her purse, fingers trembling, and pulled out her debit card. Leah handed the card to the cashier. Her fingers brushed his as he took it. She felt how cold her own hand was, how the adrenaline had pulled all the blood toward her chest, her heart hammering against her ribs. The cashier swiped the card. 1 second. 2. The machine beeped. Leah didn't breathe. The screen flashed red. Declined. The word might as well have been written in neon across the store windows. Leah's vision tunneled. No, that wasn't possible. She'd checked her balance this morning. $7.32. Enough for the medicine. Enough to cover this. Try it again, she said quickly. Please. The cashier glanced at Caleb, uncertain. Caleb's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. A straightening. A readiness. Like he'd been waiting for this. Run it again, Caleb said. The cashier swiped. Another beep. Declined. Leah's chest constricted. Her mind raced. The electric bill? Had it pulled twice? Had there been a fee she missed? A hold she didn't see? There's money in there, she said, hating how defensive she sounded. There has to be. Caleb picked up the medicine bottle again, held it just out of reach. Look, he said louder now. Loud enough that the older woman turned fully toward them. Loud enough that the man by the candy aisle stopped pretending to browse. I get it. Times are tough. But we're not a charity. Leah's face burned. I'm not asking for charity. I'm trying to buy it. With what? Caleb's voice cut through the store like a blade. A card that doesn't work? You think we're just gonna hand you stuff because you walked in here with a sob story? The older woman made a soft noise. Disgust, maybe. Or pity. Leah couldn't tell which was worse. I have money, Leah said again, quieter now. She could feel the tears building behind her eyes, and she hated it. Hated that he was doing this to her. Hated that she couldn't stop it. Hated that everyone was watching. Then where is it? Caleb leaned forward, his voice dropping into something crueler. Where's your real money? Because this, he tapped the card reader with one finger, this isn't real. This is you wasting everyone's time. The cashier looked down, uncomfortable. The man by the candy aisle pulled out his phone, and the older woman shook her head slowly, like she'd seen this before. Like she knew exactly how it would end. Leah wanted to disappear, wanted the floor to open up beneath her and swallow her whole. But she couldn't leave, because Ezra needed this medicine. And Caleb knew it. He was counting on it. You people, he said, his voice low and sharp, always pull the same stunt. The room went silent. Not the kind of silence that comes from shock. The kind that comes from confirmation. From everyone hearing what they suspected all along. Leah felt the stares like heat on her skin. The older woman near the magazines. The man with the phone. The cashier who couldn't meet her eyes. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to be looking down at her, exposing every crack in her composure. This wasn't just a transaction anymore. It was a performance. And she was the unwilling star. Caleb stepped back slightly, arms crossing over his chest. He wasn't done. He was just giving the moment room to breathe. Letting the words settle. Letting everyone absorb what he'd just said. You people. Leah's hands trembled. She pressed them flat against the counter to keep them still. She'd been here before. Not in this store. But in moments like this. Moments where she had to choose between defending herself and protecting what little dignity she had left. If she yelled, she'd be the angry black woman. If she cried, she'd be the pitiful one looking for sympathy. If she stayed silent, she'd be the guilty one who had nothing to say. There was no winning. So she did what she always did. Swallowed the rage. Buried the humiliation. Kept her voice steady. Can I try another card? She asked quietly. It was a lie. She didn't have another card. But maybe, somehow, if she bought herself a few more seconds, she could figure something out. Check her account. See what went wrong. Find a way to make this work. Caleb smirked. You got another card that actually has money on it. The man by the candy aisle snorted. Not loud. Just enough for Leah to hear. Just enough to know he was entertained. The older woman whispered something under her breath that sounded like, shameful. Leah didn't know if she meant Caleb or her. Maybe both. The cashier shifted his weight, uncomfortable. Sir, maybe we should just. Just what? Caleb cut him off. Let her walk out with merchandise she can't pay for? That's theft, Brandon. You want to be responsible for that. Brandon, the cashier, went pale. He shook his head quickly and stepped back. Leah wanted to scream at him. Wanted to ask why he wasn't saying anything. Why he was letting this happen. Why nobody in this godforsaken store would just treat her like a human being. But she already knew the answer. Because Caleb had the power here. And she didn't. Caleb picked up the medicine bottle again, holding it up to the light like he was inspecting it for damage. You know what I think, he said, his voice carrying across the store. I think you came in here hoping we'd feel sorry for you. Sick kid. Sad story. Maybe we'd just let it slide. Leah's nails dug into her palms. But that's not how the world works, Caleb continued. You want something? You pay for it. Like everyone else. He set the bottle down behind the counter. Out of reach. So unless you've got real money, he said, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. The room seemed to tilt. Leah's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't leave. She couldn't. But she also couldn't stay here. Couldn't keep letting him tear her apart in front of strangers who'd forget her face by morning. And that's when the door chimed. Leah barely registered the door chime. Her mind was stuck on the card reader. On the red screen. On the word that kept flashing behind her eyes like a neon sign. Declined. but it didn't make sense. She'd checked her account that morning. $7.32. She'd memorized the number because she always did, knew exactly how much she had, down to the penny, because she had to. The electric bill was supposed to clear on the 15th. Today was the 12th. So where did the money go? Her pulse hammered in her ears. She tried to think through the fog of humiliation, tried to retrace her steps. Had there been a fee? An overdraft charge from last week? A hold she didn't know about? No. She'd been careful. She was always careful. Something was wrong. Caleb was still talking, something about store policy, about how he couldn't just give away merchandise, but his voice felt distant now, like he was speaking from the other end of a tunnel. Leah pulled her phone from her purse with shaking hands. She opened her banking app, the screen too bright in the dim store light, and waited for it to load. 1 second. 2. The page refreshed. Available balance, $0. Her stomach dropped. No. She scrolled down, her thumb slipping on the glass. There had to be a mistake. A glitch. Something. And then she saw it. A charge from this morning. Posted at 9:47 a.m. Easy Pump Gas, Silver Spring, Maryland, $42.18. Leah's breath stopped. She hadn't been to a gas station today. She didn't even own a car. Her chest tightened. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a fee or a miscalculation. Someone had used her card. Someone had drained her account while she was at work, while she was changing bedpans and checking vitals and trying to keep herself together long enough to make it through another shift. And now she was standing in a store, being humiliated in front of strangers because someone stole the only money she had. The injustice of it hit her like a physical blow. She wanted to scream, wanted to throw the phone across the store, wanted to explain to Caleb, to Brandon, to the woman still watching her like she was a spectacle, that this wasn't her fault, that she'd done everything right and it still wasn't enough. But she couldn't form the words, couldn't make her voice work, because even if she told them, even if she explained, it wouldn't matter. Caleb had already decided who she was, and nothing she said would change that. Ma'am. Caleb's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. Are you going to buy something or not? Leah looked up at him, at his smug expression, his crossed arms, his absolute certainty that he was right about her. And something inside her cracked. Not broke. Cracked. Just enough to let the anger through. I had money, she said, her voice low and trembling. I had money, and someone stole it. Caleb's eyebrow raised. Sure they did. The disbelief in Caleb's voice wasn't subtle. It was mockery dressed up as skepticism. Someone stole it. He repeated slowly, like he was explaining something to a child. Right? And let me guess, you've got no way to prove that. No way to pay. But you still want me to just hand you the medicine. Leah's jaw tightened. I'm not lying. Didn't say you were. Caleb shrugged, but his eyes said otherwise. I'm just saying it's convenient. Real convenient. You come in here, card doesn't work, and suddenly it's because someone stole from you. The older woman made a soft sking sound. The man with the phone was still recording. Leah could see the little red dot in her peripheral vision, capturing every moment of her humiliation for strangers to watch later. I can show you. Leah held up her phone, her hand shaking. The transaction. It's right here. I didn't. Ma'am. Caleb's voice hardened. I don't care what's on your phone. I care about what's in the register. And right now, you've got nothing. He picked up the medicine bottle and held it up, like he was making a point to everyone watching. This is how it always goes with you people, he said. There it was again. Clearer this time. Sharper. No room for misinterpretation. The cashier, Brandon, shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. The man with the phone kept recording. And the older woman nodded slightly, like Caleb had just confirmed something she'd always believed. Leah felt the words like a punch to the chest. You people, Caleb continued, his voice rising just enough to make sure everyone could hear. Come in here with your stories. Your excuses. Your hands out. And you expect the rest of us to just go along with it. I'm not asking for a handout, Leah said, her voice cracking despite her best efforts to keep it steady. I'm trying to pay. With what? Caleb snapped. Fairy dust? Good intentions. He shook his head, his lip curling in disgust. You don't have money. You probably never did. You just thought you'd walk in here, play the victim, and someone would feel sorry enough to let you walk out with free stuff. Leah's vision blurred. She wasn't going to cry. She wasn't. But her body didn't seem to care what she wanted. The tears built anyway, hot and humiliating, threatening to spill over. That's not. Save it. Caleb cut her off. I've worked retail for 15 years. I've seen every scam there is. And this. He gestured at her with the medicine bottle. This is textbook. He turned to Brandon. Next time someone like her comes in, you check the card first, before you skin anything. Got it. Brandon nodded quickly, his face red. Someone like her. The room felt smaller. Hotter. Leah's hands were shaking so badly, she had to shove them into her pockets. And that's when she heard it. The door chime. Again. But this time, someone spoke. Caleb. The voice was low, calm, and it changed everything. Leah didn't turn toward the voice. She couldn't. Because if she moved, if she acknowledged anything outside the narrow tunnel of her focus, she'd break. And she couldn't break. Not here. Not in front of these people. Her mind was already fracturing, pulling her back to other moments. Other stores. Other men who'd looked at her the same way Caleb was looking at her now. She was 16 again, in the department store on Georgia Avenue. Security following her through the aisles even though her hands were empty and her mother was right beside her. She was 22, trying to return a blender with a receipt, being told the serial number didn't match, while the white woman behind her returned 3 items without anyone checking anything. She was 27, 8 months pregnant with Ezra, standing in a grocery store while a manager accused her of stealing baby formula she'd literally just paid for, until another customer spoke up and confirmed they'd seen her at the register. Every single time, she'd swallowed it, kept her voice calm, kept her face neutral, kept her hands visible, because the alternative was worse. The alternative was being labeled angry, aggressive, dangerous. The alternative was proving them right. And the worst part, the part that made her want to scream until her throat bled, was that it didn't matter how careful she was, how polite, how educated or articulate or good. People like Caleb had already decided. She could be perfect, and it still wouldn't be enough. Leah's throat burned. The tears she'd been fighting pushed harder, blurring her vision. She blinked rapidly, trying to force them back. She would not cry. Crying meant weakness. Meant she couldn't handle it. Meant Caleb had won. And he was already winning. She could feel it in the way the older woman was looking at her. Not with sympathy, but with that specific kind of pity reserved for people who should have known better. She could feel it in the way Brandon avoided her eyes, like guilt and complicity were the same thing. She could feel it in the weight of the phone camera still recording her, capturing her humiliation so strangers could watch it later and make their own judgments. Did she really think she'd get away with it? Why didn't she just leave? There's always more to the story. Leah's biggest fear wasn't the racism itself. It was the helplessness, the knowledge that no matter what she said, no matter how she defended herself, the narrative was already written. She was already cast, already guilty, and there was nothing she could do to change it. Her hands curled into fists inside her pockets, nails biting into her palms hard enough to leave marks. She thought of Ezra, alone, feverish, waiting for her, and she thought of how she'd have to go home empty-handed and explain why Mama couldn't make the hurt stop. The shame of it crushed her. But the voice behind her spoke again. Closer now. Caleb, step away from the counter. And this time, Leah did turn. The man standing near the entrance didn't belong to the fluorescent-lit chaos of Greenwood Market at midnight. He was too still, too composed. Navy wool coat, tailored enough to suggest money but worn enough to suggest he didn't care about proving it. Dark jeans, leather boots that had seen actual use. His face was unreadable, sharp jawline, eyes that tracked movement with the kind of precision that came from training, not habit. He wasn't browsing. He wasn't shopping. He was observing. Leah's breath caught. She didn't recognize him. Not immediately. Her mind was too fractured, too overwhelmed by the last 10 minutes of humiliation to process anything clearly. But something about him felt wrong. No, not wrong. Familiar. Caleb noticed him too. His posture shifted. The smugness that had armored him through the entire confrontation flickered, just for a second, replaced by something sharper. Wariness. The man took 3 steps forward, his movements deliberate, unhurried, like he had all the time in the world and knew it. Brandon, the cashier, looked between Caleb and the stranger, confusion spreading across his face. The older woman edged toward the door, suddenly less interested in the spectacle. The man with the phone lowered it slightly, instinct telling him the story had just shifted into something he didn't understand yet. And Leah just stood there, frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs. The stranger's eyes swept the store, took in the scratch counter, the declined transaction still glowing red on the card reader, the medicine bottle sitting just out of Leah's reach. Then his gaze landed on Caleb, and stayed there. "Caleb," he said again, quieter this time, almost conversational. But there was nothing casual about it. It was the kind of quiet that came before violence, before consequences, before everything you thought you controlled slipped out of your hands. Caleb's throat bobbed. "Can I help you?" "You can step away from the counter." It wasn't a request. Caleb didn't move. But Leah saw the calculation happening behind his eyes, saw him trying to figure out who this man was, what authority he had, whether he could be dismissed the same way he'd dismissed her. The stranger pulled something from his coat pocket. Not a weapon, a wallet. He flipped it open, holding it up just long enough for Caleb to see. Leah couldn't make out the details from where she stood, but she saw Caleb's face drain of color, saw his shoulders stiffen, saw him take one involuntary step backward. "Oh," Caleb said softly. Then again, quieter. "Oh." The stranger closed the wallet and slipped it back into his pocket. "We need to talk," he said. "Right now." And Leah's mind finally caught up, because she'd just placed the voice, just recognized the way he held himself, just remembered why he felt familiar. And the realization hit her like cold water. No, it couldn't be. She hadn't seen him in 3 years, hadn't spoken to him, hadn't forgiven him. But there he was, standing 10 feet away. Her brother, Jalen. Leah's knees almost gave out. Jalen Marston. Her brother. Her blood. The person who'd vanished from her life 3 years ago without explanation, without apology, without looking back. And now he was here, in this store, at this moment, in the middle of her worst humiliation. Her mind couldn't process it, couldn't reconcile the man in the navy coat with the brother who used to pick her up from late shifts, who used to slip her $20 bills when her account ran dry, who used to be there. Until he wasn't. Until he cut ties with the entire family and disappeared like they'd meant nothing. Leah's hands trembled. She didn't know if it was rage or relief or some horrible combination of both. "Jalen." Her voice came out broken, barely a whisper. He didn't turn toward her, didn't acknowledge her. His entire focus stayed locked on Caleb, who looked like he'd just seen a ghost holding a loaded gun. Subscribe if you've ever had someone vanish from your life. You need to see what happens next. "You know this guy?" Brandon asked nervously, looking between Jalen and Caleb. Caleb didn't answer. His jaw worked like he was chewing on words he couldn't spit out. Jalen took another step forward. "Caleb, back office. Now. I'm in the middle of. Now." The command cut through the air like a blade. Caleb swallowed hard. For the first time all night, he looked small, uncertain. He glanced at Leah, then back at Jalen, then at the medicine bottle still sitting on the counter. "Brandon," Caleb said quietly, "watch the register." He moved toward the back of the store, his confidence stripped away, replaced by something that looked a lot like fear. Jalen followed, his movements controlled, deliberate, and then they were gone. Disappeared through the door marked employees only, leaving Leah standing at the counter with her heart in her throat and 1,000 questions screaming in her head. What the hell just happened? Why was Jalen here? How did he know Caleb? And why did Caleb look like he'd just been caught doing something he could never take back? Brandon cleared his throat awkwardly. Do you still want the medicine?" Leah stared at him. Her brain felt like it was moving through mud. I can't pay for it." Brandon hesitated. Then he glanced at the door Jalen and Caleb had disappeared through. "Just take it," he said quietly. "What? Take it." Brandon slid the bottle across the counter toward her. "I'll void the transaction. Say it was damaged or something. Just take it and go." Leah looked down at the medicine. The thing she'd been fighting for. The thing Caleb had used to humiliate her. And now it was being handed to her out of pity, or guilt, or fear of whoever Jalen was. She didn't know which was worse. Her hand hovered over the bottle, and from somewhere behind the employees-only door, she heard Jalen's voice. Low, controlled, and absolutely furious. "You want to explain what the hell I just watched you do?" Leah's fingers closed around the medicine, but she didn't leave, because she needed to know, needed to understand what her brother was doing here, and why Caleb looked like the ground had just opened up beneath him. Leah's hand gripped the medicine bottle, but her feet wouldn't move. She should leave, should take what Brandon offered and get back to Ezra before her neighbors started asking questions she didn't have answers for. But she couldn't. Not until she understood what was happening behind that door. Brandon shifted uncomfortably. Ma'am, you should probably. How does he know Caleb? Leah asked. Brandon blinked. Who? That guy. My brother. The word tasted strange in her mouth. Foreign. Like claiming ownership of someone who'd stopped being family years ago. Brandon's eyes widened. That's your brother? Leah didn't answer. She was already moving toward the employees-only door, the medicine clutched against her chest. Wait, you can't go back there. But she was already pushing through. The back hallway was narrow, cramped. Boxes of inventory stacked against water-stained walls. A bulletin board covered in OSHA regulations and a faded delivery schedule from 2 months ago. And voices. Jalen's. Caleb's. Coming from the office at the end of the hall. Told you we were monitoring this location, Jalen was saying. His voice was low, controlled, but there was an edge to it Leah remembered from childhood. The tone he used right before he did something their mother would ground him for. I didn't know she was, Caleb started. Didn't know what? Jalen cut him off. Didn't know she was a human being? Didn't know you can't humiliate customers because you've decided they don't deserve basic respect? Leah froze outside the door. Monitoring? Customers? What the hell was Jalen talking about? Look, man, I was just doing my job, Caleb said, desperation creeping into his voice. We've had theft issues, and she couldn't pay, So you accused her of running a scam. Called her you people. Made sure everyone in the store knew exactly what you thought of her. Silence. Then Caleb, quieter. How long have you been here? Long enough. Leah's breath caught. Long enough. Which meant Jalen had been in the store before she arrived. Had watched her walk in. Had seen Caleb target her. Had let it happen. Her chest tightened. Anger flared hot and sharp. Why didn't he stop it? Why didn't he say something the moment Caleb grabbed the medicine from her hand? Why did he let her stand there, humiliated and powerless, while he watched? I've been tracking discrimination complaints tied to this location for 4 months, Jalen continued. Guess whose name came up in every single report? Caleb didn't answer. You've been harassing customers, Caleb. Specifically targeting black and brown people. Making assumptions. Treating them like criminals. And tonight? You just gave me everything I need to shut you down. Leah's mind reeled. For months. Jalen had been investigating this store for 4 months. He wasn't here by accident. He wasn't here to rescue her. He'd been hunting Caleb long before she ever walked through that door. And she'd had no idea. Leah pressed her palm against the wall to steady herself. Corporate compliance investigator. The words didn't fit. Didn't match the Jalen she remembered. The one who'd worked construction, who'd talked about starting his own landscaping business, who'd spent weekends helping their uncle renovate houses in Northeast D.C. That Jalen wore Carhartt jackets and steel-toed boots caked in mud. This Jalen wore tailored wool and spoke with the kind of authority that made managers go pale. When had he changed? And why hadn't he told her? You can't prove anything, Caleb said, but there was no conviction in it. Just the desperate bluff of someone who knew they were cornered. Can't I? Jalen's voice was calm. Clinical. I've got 4 months of incident reports. Surveillance footage from 3 separate complaints. Witness statements from customers and former employees. And now I've got tonight, where you publicly harassed a woman, weaponized a declined transaction, and used racially charged language in front of multiple witnesses. A pause. Then, quieter, deadlier. One of those witnesses was me. Leah heard something hit the desk. A hand, maybe. Or a folder. The corporation takes discrimination seriously, Caleb. You know why? Not because they care about doing the right thing. Because lawsuits are expensive. PR nightmares are expensive. And you just became both. I didn't mean. You meant every word. Jalen's voice hardened. And we both know this isn't the first time. Leah's mind flashed back to 3 years ago. To the week Jalen stopped answering calls. To the family dinner where his chair sat empty and their mother cried into her mashed potatoes. To the rumors that he'd gotten into trouble. That he'd left the city. That he wanted nothing to do with them anymore. Nobody knew why. He just disappeared. And now she was learning he'd been doing this. Hunting down racist store managers? Working for the same corporations that underpaid people like her? Why? What happened that made him walk away from everything, from everyone, to do this? Here's what's going to happen, Jalen said, his voice cutting through her spiraling thoughts. You're going to write a formal incident report. You're going to document exactly what you said to that woman tonight. And you're going to submit it to HR by noon tomorrow. And if I don't, Then I submit mine, along with the footage, the witness statements, and a recommendation for immediate termination and a civil rights investigation. Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. Then Caleb, barely a whisper. You've been planning this. I've been doing my job, Jalen corrected. You made it easy. Leah's hands shook. She didn't know what she was supposed to feel. Relief that someone had finally held Caleb accountable? Rage that Jalen had let her suffer through that humiliation instead of stopping it immediately? Confusion about why her estranged brother was working undercover in a grocery store in Silver Spring? All of it crashed together in her chest, a knot of emotion she couldn't untangle. And then Jalen said something that made her blood run cold. There's something else, Caleb. Something you need to know before this goes any further. A pause. That woman you just humiliated? She's my sister. The silence that followed was suffocating. Leah couldn't breathe, couldn't move. She's my sister. Jalen had just weaponized her, turned her humiliation into ammunition, and she didn't know whether to feel vindicated or violated. Inside the office, she heard Caleb's sharp intake of breath. You're what? My sister, Jalen repeated, slower, making sure it landed. The woman you just spent 10 minutes degrading in front of your customers. That's Leah Marston, my younger sister. A beat. Then Caleb, his voice thin. I didn't know. Would it have mattered? No answer. Leah's jaw clenched. Of course it wouldn't have mattered. Caleb hadn't seen her as someone's sister, someone's mother, someone's anything. He'd seen a black woman with a declined card and made every assumption that followed. You want to know why I've been tracking you specifically? Jalen asked. His voice had shifted. There was something personal in it now. Something that went beyond compliance reports and corporate policy. Something that scared Leah more than anything else tonight. 4 months ago, a complaint came through about this location. Woman in her 60s, shopping for groceries. You followed her through the store, accused her of shoplifting, called security, made her empty her purse in front of everyone. Leah's stomach dropped. She knew the story. She hadn't taken anything, Jalen continued. But you were so convinced, so certain. You humiliated her, traumatized her. And when she tried to file a complaint, the district manager buried it. Caleb said nothing. That woman was someone's mother too, Jalen said quietly. And when I saw the report, when I saw your name attached to it, I knew exactly what kind of manager you were. Leah heard footsteps, movement. So I requested the assignment, Jalen said. Asked to audit this location personally. Spent 4 months watching you, documenting, building a case so airtight you'd never work retail again. The pieces were clicking together in Leah's mind. Jalen hadn't stumbled into this store tonight. He'd been circling Caleb for months, waiting, watching. And tonight, when Leah walked through that door, when Caleb targeted her the same way he'd targeted dozens of others, Jalen finally had everything he needed. You used me, Leah whispered. She didn't mean to say it out loud, but the words escaped anyway, raw and broken. Inside the office, Jalen went quiet. And Leah knew with absolute certainty, that he'd heard her. You think this is about you? Caleb's voice cracked. Desperate. Grasping. He's been stalking me for months. He's obsessed. This isn't about policy or complaints or... Shut up, Caleb. Jalen's voice was ice. You don't get to talk about obsession. Not after what you did. Leah's breath caught. What you did. Not what Caleb was doing now. What he did. Past tense. Which meant this wasn't just about the complaints. This wasn't just about tonight. This went back further. Deeper. And suddenly Leah realized. She didn't know the whole story. Not even close. Leah pushed the door open. Both men turned. Jalen's expression shifted. Surprise. Then something harder. Something that looked like guilt trying to hide behind professional detachment. Caleb just looked trapped. The office was small. Cluttered. A metal desk buried under paperwork. A filing cabinet with a broken drawer. A calendar from 2019 still hanging on the wall. It smelled like stale coffee and desperation. Leah, Jalen started. Don't. Her voice came out sharper than she'd intended. Sharper than she'd ever spoken to him. Even when they were kids fighting over the TV remote. But she wasn't a kid anymore. And he didn't get to protect her by letting her get destroyed first. Jalen's jaw tightened. He looked like he wanted to say something, but thought better of it. Good. Leah turned to Caleb. He was leaning against the desk, arms crossed defensively, but the arrogance from earlier was gone. Stripped away. He looked smaller now. Cornered. Like a man who just realized the game was rigged against him all along. You've been watching him. Leah said, her eyes still on Caleb but her words aimed at Jalen. For 4 months. Yes. And you knew I shopped here. A pause. No, I didn't. Leah's head snapped toward him. Liar. Jalen didn't flinch. I've been tracking 17 locations across the metro area. I didn't know you'd be here tonight. That part was convenient. Coincidence. Leah laughed. It came out bitter. Broken. You let him humiliate me. I had to see it happen. Jalen's voice was calm. Too calm. Like he'd rehearsed this conversation in his head 100 times. If I'd stepped in immediately, he could have claimed I was biased. That I had a personal connection that compromised the investigation. I am your personal connection. I know. So you watched. Leah's voice cracked. You stood there and watched him call me you people and accuse me of scamming his store, and you just, what? Took notes. Jalen's composure slipped. Just for a second. But Leah saw it. Saw the pain underneath the professionalism. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Sorry doesn't fix what just happened out there. I know. Caleb cleared his throat. Look, if this is a family thing, maybe I should. Sit down. Jalen didn't even look at him. Caleb sat. The shift in power was instantaneous. Total. 10 minutes ago, Caleb had been the authority. The manager. The one who decided who belonged and who didn't. Now he was just a man in a cramped office, facing consequences he'd spent months outrunning. Leah watched him deflate and felt nothing. No satisfaction. No vindication. Just exhaustion. Why didn't you call? She asked Jalen. 3 years. You disappeared. Blocked everyone's numbers. Mom thought you were dead. Jalen's expression cracked. I couldn't. Why not? He looked at Caleb, then back at Leah, and she saw something in his eyes that terrified her. Regret. Rage. And something else. Shame. Because of him, Jalen said. Leah's world tilted. What? Jalen's eyes stayed locked on Caleb, who'd gone completely still. Frozen. Like moving might shatter whatever fragile protection silence offered him. 3 years ago, Jalen said slowly. Caleb worked at a different location. Warehouse distribution center in Tacoma Park. I was working there too. Overnight inventory. Leah's mind raced. She didn't remember Jalen mentioning a warehouse job. But 3 years ago, everything had been chaos. She just had Ezra. Their father had just passed. The family was barely holding together. There was an incident, Jalen continued. Corporate launched an investigation. Someone reported stolen merchandise. High-value electronics disappearing from shipments. Caleb's face had gone gray. They needed a scapegoat, Jalen said. Someone to blame. Someone who wouldn't fight back. Leah's stomach twisted. No. Caleb gave them a name. Jalen's voice was quiet. Controlled. But underneath it, Leah heard 3 years of rage. Told the investigators he'd seen someone tampering with inventory logs. Someone who worked overnight shift. Someone who needed the money. Leah's breath stopped. He gave them your name? She whispered. No. Jalen's jaw clenched. He gave them Uncle Ray's. The floor dropped out from under her. Uncle Ray, their father's younger brother. The man who'd helped raise them after their dad died. Who'd paid for Jalen's trade school. Who'd been at the hospital when Ezra was born. Uncle Ray, who'd had a heart attack 2.5 years ago. Who'd died alone in his apartment because he'd been too ashamed to ask for help after losing his job. Subscribe if you've ever lost someone who deserved better. This is about to break wide open. No, Leah said. No, that's not. Uncle Ray got fired because Caleb lied. Jalen's voice cut through her denial like glass. Ray didn't steal anything. But Caleb needed someone to blame, and Ray was convenient. Older. Black. Worked nights. Kept to himself. Leah turned to Caleb, her vision blurring. He wouldn't defend himself, Jalen continued. Wouldn't fight the accusation. Just took the termination and left. And I couldn't. His voice cracked. I couldn't prove it. Couldn't fix it. Corporate closed the investigation. Caleb got transferred here. Got promoted. And Ray, he didn't finish. He didn't have to. Leah remembered the funeral. Remembered how small the service was. How few people came. Remembered Jalen standing at the back of the church, silent and hollow. And then disappearing 2 weeks later. You left because of this, she whispered. Jalen nodded. I couldn't stay. Couldn't look at Mom. Couldn't watch the family fall apart knowing I'd failed him. Failed to protect him. So you hunted Caleb instead. I hunted people like Caleb, Jalen corrected. I made sure no one else would lose everything because someone decided they were expendable. Leah looked at Caleb. At the man who destroyed her uncle. who'd humiliated her tonight, who'd never once thought about the lives he ruined. And something inside her ignited. You knew? Leah's voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through the room like a scream. Caleb's head snapped up. What? You knew who I was. Her hands were shaking. When I walked into that store tonight. When you saw my card. You saw my name. Caleb's face went blank. Too blank. The kind of blank that came from trying to hide something. Jalen straightened. Leah. Marston, she continued, her voice rising. My last name is on my debit card. You saw it before you even swiped it. Caleb opened his mouth. Closed it. Did you know? Leah asked again. Silence. And that silence was an answer. Jalen moved so fast Leah barely registered it. He was across the room in 2 steps, his hand slamming down on the desk beside Caleb. Answer her. Caleb flinched. Look, I didn't. You knew? Jalen's voice was lethal. You recognized her last name, and you humiliated her anyway. It's a common name. Don't. Jalen leaned in closer. Don't you dare lie to me right now. Caleb's composure shattered. Fine. Yeah, I saw the name. I thought, I wasn't sure. But you suspected. Leah's vision blurred with rage. You thought I might be connected to Jalen. And you did it anyway. Caleb's throat worked. I didn't think he'd. What? Jalen demanded. Didn't think I'd still be watching? Didn't think there'd be consequences? I didn't think you'd care. Caleb snapped, his desperation finally breaking through. You disappeared. Vanished. I thought you'd given up. Moved on. I never moved on, Jalen said quietly. I've been waiting for you to slip up. And tonight, you gave me everything. Leah's mind was reeling. Caleb had recognized her name. Had suspected, maybe even known, she was Jalen's sister. And he'd humiliated her anyway. Not despite who she was. Because of it. The cruelty of it took her breath away. Why? She asked. Why would you do that? Caleb looked at her for the first time since she'd entered the room. Really looked at her. And what she saw in his eyes made her stomach turn. Not guilt. Not remorse. Resentment. Because your brother ruined my life, Caleb said bitterly. He got me flagged. Monitored. Corporate's been on my back for months because of him. I've been written up 3 times. Passed over for promotions. Treated like a criminal. You are a criminal, Jalen said coldly. You framed an innocent man. I did my job. You lied. I protected the company. You destroyed a life to cover your own ass. Jalen's voice was shaking now. And when that life ended, when Ray died alone because you took everything from him, you didn't even care. Caleb's jaw clenched. That wasn't my fault. It was exactly your fault. And then Leah understood. Understood why Jalen had disappeared. Why he'd cut ties with everyone. Why he'd spent 3 years hunting people like Caleb instead of coming home. Because he blamed himself. For not protecting Uncle Ray. For not stopping Caleb. For not being enough. And tonight, seeing Caleb humiliate his sister, had ripped open every wound he'd spent 3 years trying to close. Tell her what you did. Jalen's voice was steel. Unbreakable. Caleb shook his head. I already told you. Tell her the rest. Jalen leaned against the desk, arms crossed. Tell her about the report you filed. The details you invented. Leah's pulse hammered in her ears. What details? Caleb's eyes darted toward the door. Looking for escape. Finding none. Corporate needed evidence. Jalen said when Caleb didn't answer. They couldn't just fire someone based on suspicion. They needed documentation. A pattern. He turned to Leah, his expression carved from stone. So Caleb created one. Leah's throat constricted. What do you mean, created? He falsified incident reports, Jalen said. Went back through 6 months of inventory logs and flagged discrepancies. Said he'd witnessed Ray mishandling shipments. Altering counts. Acting suspicious during overnight shifts. That's not, Caleb started. Shut up. Jalen didn't even look at him. He submitted 14 separate reports over 3 weeks. Each one more detailed than the last. Timestamps. Locations. Specific merchandise. Leah felt sick. None of it was true, Jalen continued. Ray worked day shift during that period. Wasn't even in the building during half the incidents Caleb reported. But corporate didn't check. Didn't verify. They just saw a pattern and pulled the trigger. I had to give them something, Caleb said desperately. They were threatening to shut down the whole warehouse. People were going to lose their jobs. I had to. You had to save yourself, Jalen cut him off. You were the shift supervisor. You were responsible for inventory oversight. And when thousands of dollars in electronics went missing on your watch, you needed someone else to take the fall. Leah's hands curled into fists. Uncle Ray. Quiet, hard-working Uncle Ray, who'd never missed a shift in 20 years. Who'd been so ashamed after being fired that he couldn't face the family. Who'd stopped answering calls. Who'd died alone because he thought he'd let everyone down. He didn't steal anything, Leah whispered. No, Jalen confirmed. He didn't. Then who did? Silence. Jalen's eyes locked onto Caleb. And Caleb looked away. Oh my God, Leah breathed. It was you. Caleb's face flushed. I didn't, it wasn't like that. You stole the merchandise, Leah said, her voice rising. And you blamed Ray. I borrowed some electronics to sell. Caleb snapped, his desperation finally breaking into anger. I was going to pay it back. But then corporate started the investigation, and I panicked. I needed the job. I had bills. A mortgage. I couldn't lose everything because of a stupid mistake. So you destroyed Ray instead. Caleb's jaw worked. He was old. Close to retirement anyway. It wasn't going to. He had 15 years left, Jalen said quietly. 15 years before his pension fully vested. You took that from him. Took his livelihood. His dignity. His reason to keep going. Leah couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. All she could see was Uncle Ray's face at the funeral. Jalen's. Her mother's. All the damage one man's cowardice had caused. Leah turned away from Caleb. She couldn't look at him anymore. Couldn't stand the sight of him sitting there, still making excuses, still minimizing what he'd done. She looked at Jalen instead. At her brother. Her blood. The person who'd carried this alone for 3 years. You should have told me, she said. Jalen's shoulders sagged. I couldn't. Why not? Because I failed him. His voice cracked. I was there. I worked alongside Ray. I knew something was off about Caleb's reports. I questioned them. But I didn't push hard enough. Didn't fight loud enough. And by the time I figured out what really happened, Ray was already gone. So you left. I couldn't stay, Jalen said. Couldn't sit at family dinners knowing I'd let him die thinking he was a thief. Couldn't watch Mom cry and know it was my fault for not protecting him. It wasn't your fault. Leah's voice broke. It was his. She pointed at Caleb without looking at him. I know, Jalen whispered. But knowing doesn't make it easier. Leah understood that. Understood it in her bones. Because she'd spent 3 years angry at Jalen for abandoning them. For choosing silence over family. For leaving her alone to pick up the pieces after Ray died. After their mother fell apart. After everything collapsed. And now she was learning he'd been fighting the whole time. Just not in a way she could see. You could have told me what you were doing, she said quietly. Could have let me in. I wanted to. Jalen looked at her fully for the first time. Every day? But I was afraid if I came back, if I let myself be part of the family again, I'd lose focus. I'd stop hunting. I'd let people like Caleb keep destroying lives because it was easier than fighting. So you chose revenge over us. I chose justice, Jalen corrected. And yeah, maybe I chose it over everything else. But I couldn't live with myself if I didn't. Leah's eyes burned. She wanted to scream at him. Wanted to tell him he'd been selfish, that the family needed him more than strangers did, that she'd needed him. But she also understood. Understood the weight of failing someone you loved. Understood the need to make it mean something. Understood why he couldn't come home until he'd finished what he started. I missed you, she said. Jalen's composure shattered. I missed you too. Mom thinks you hate us. I could never. Then tell her. Leah's voice hardened. When this is over. When you've finished burying him. She gestured toward Caleb. You come home. You explain. You apologize. And you stay. Jalen nodded, his throat working. I will. Promise me. I promise. Leah held his gaze for a long moment. Then she turned back to Caleb. And the fury she'd been holding back finally broke free. What happens to him now? Jalen straightened, pulling his phone from his coat pocket. 3 outcomes, he said, his voice returning to that clinical, professional tone. You resign tonight. Effective immediately. Write a confession detailing what you did to Raymond Marston. Submit it to corporate HR and copy me. Caleb's face went white. That's, I'd never work again. Option 2. Jalen continued, ignoring him. I file my report. For months of documentation. Tonight's incident with my sister. Witness testimony. Video evidence. Corporate launches a formal investigation. You get terminated. Possibly prosecuted for fraud and theft. You can't prove. I can prove all of it. Jalen's eyes were cold. I've been building this case since the day Ray died. I have access to the original inventory logs. The ones you altered. I have testimony from 3 coworkers who saw you removing merchandise. And I have your own reports, the ones where you got sloppy with the timestamps. Caleb slumped forward, his head in his hands. What's option 3? Leah asked. Jalen looked at her. There isn't one. He turned back to Caleb. You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow to decide. Resign with a confession, or I bury you. If you believe people like this deserve what's coming, subscribe, because this isn't over yet. Jalen moved toward the door, gesturing for Leah to follow. But she didn't. Not yet. She stepped closer to Caleb, her voice low and steady. You looked at me tonight and decided I was nothing, she said. Decided I was a thief. A scammer. Someone who didn't deserve basic human decency. And you did it because of my skin. Because of assumptions you made in 10 seconds. Caleb didn't look up. You did the same thing to Uncle Ray, Leah continued. And it killed him. Not the firing. Not the shame. The fact that people like you exist. People who destroy lives and sleep fine at night. Her voice hardened. I hope you never sleep again. She turned and walked out. Jalen followed, closing the door behind them. They walked through the back hallway in silence. Through the store, past Brandon, who was pretending to reorganize cigarettes behind the counter. Past the older woman, who'd finally left. Past the man with the phone, who'd stopped recording. The automatic doors slid open. Cool night air hit Leah's face. She stopped on the sidewalk, the medicine bottle still clutched in her hand. What happens now? She asked. Jalen looked back at the store. At the fluorescent lights. At the cameras he'd been feeding footage to for months. Now, he said quietly. We wait. For what? For him to make his choice. Leah studied her brother's face. Saw the exhaustion there. The weight of 3 years spent hunting instead of healing. And after, she pressed. After he's gone and your case is closed. What then? Jalen met her eyes. Then I come home. Leah nodded slowly. She wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust that this time, he'd keep his promise. But before she could respond, Jalen's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, his expression shifting as he read the screen. What? Leah asked. Jalen's jaw tightened. We need to go back inside. Why? He turned the phone toward her, and Leah's blood ran cold. The email on Jalen's phone was from Corporate Compliance Headquarters. Subject line, urgent, Greenwood Market flagged, immediate review required. Leah's hands went numb. What does that mean? Jalen was already moving back toward the entrance, his jaw set. It means the system triggered an automatic alert. Something in tonight's transaction data. What kind of something? He didn't answer. Just pushed through the doors. Leah followed, her heart hammering. Inside, Brandon looked up nervously. Did you forget? Where's your transaction server? Jalen asked. The what? The computer system. Back in access. Where is it? Brandon pointed toward the office. Same place. But Caleb still. Jalen was already moving. Back through the employees-only door. Back down the narrow hallway. Caleb was still in the office, slumped over the desk, his phone in his hand. He looked up when they entered. I thought we were. Move. Jalen gestured to the computer. You can't just move. Now. Something in Jalen's voice made Caleb stand without another word. Jalen sat down, his fingers flying over the keyboard. Screens flickered. Code scrolled. Data populated in columns Leah didn't understand. What are you looking for? She asked. Transaction patterns, Jalen muttered. The alert said there were irregularities flagged across multiple customer accounts over the past 6 months. What kind of irregularities? Jalen's face went pale. Card skimming, he said quietly. Leah's stomach dropped. What? Someone's been running a skimming operation through this location. Small charges. Under $10. Spread across hundreds of accounts so nobody notices. He pulled up another screen. Numbers. Dates. Transaction IDs. Thousands of them. Jesus, Jalen breathed. Caleb took a step back. I don't know anything about. Your employee login is attached to every single flagged transaction. Jalen's voice was deadly quiet. Every single one. The room went silent. Leah's mind raced. Card skimming. Fraud. Federal crimes. This wasn't just about Uncle Ray anymore. This was about hundreds, maybe thousands, of victims. How much? She whispered. Jalen scrolled down. And down. And down. Conservative estimate. He looked up, his expression unreadable. 250,000. Maybe more. Caleb made a choking sound. You weren't just stealing from the company, Jalen said. You were stealing from customers. For months. He stood, pulling his phone out. This isn't corporate anymore, he said. This is federal. Caleb's face crumpled. Wait, please, I can explain. But Jalen was already dialing. And Leah realized with cold certainty that everything they'd confronted tonight, the humiliation, the racism, even Uncle Ray's death, was just the surface. Caleb Rourke wasn't just a bigot who destroyed one man's life. He was a criminal who'd been destroying hundreds. And tonight, it had all finally caught up with him. Jalen lifted the phone to his ear. Federal Trade Commission. I need to report. The screen went dark.